So this is partially what's in the handouts. This is the number one thing. I'm going to show you who all we have on today. Good. We have a good group. We have a little bit of variety of all different amounts of time of being here. Director, cook, lots of teachers, which I love to see, because we did intend, that's kind of what we intended this for those infant teachers that are in the room. Okay, so I'm getting that you cannot hear me. Can anybody else hear me? I show that I am on. Okay, okay, so if you. Okay. All right, so I have so right here is some of the handouts that we did not unfortunately get the handouts to you. I think we sent 2 sets of slides, but these are in the resource library under, again, the training. If you go to the resource library, go to training and go to training slides and handouts. So this first, this first handout is, we're going to talk about the Feeding Infants Guide. So we have what's called the Infant Feeding Guide. We have this crediting handbook. These are all located as well in the resource library. So this crediting handbook is under the meal pattern section. We have the food buying guide, which is also under the meal pattern section. And the last one is the Feeding Infants Guide. I love this book. It's a great book. We sent this to you last year with your training manual that you received. I would go out there if you can. It's 135 pages long. It's in PDF. We also give you the link, and you can just download that link. If you don't have a copy of this, you can download it to your computer. But it's a great book. We're going to refer to it often. It's a great resource. So I did want to point that out regarding the handouts. We also, in the handouts, we have infant meal patterns. We have for breakfast, for lunch, and for snack that we'll be going over. We have a grains chart that we will also be going over. And then we have, if you buy, which I know from what I'm understanding, a lot of people are not doing this, there's certain store-bought things you can buy, like for instance, chicken and noodles. And as long as it has information on the label, you can serve it. It's kind of like having a CN label, but a lot of times they're expensive. So people are kind of getting away from doing that, which they used to not be creditable before. And then this sheet right here is from the manual. These two, it's on page 207 and 208 in the manual. So just some good information for infants. And that is all of the handouts. Again, if you would like those, you can just go out to the resource library. It's a PDF. You can download that and put it on, you can print it out or go ahead and put it on your desktop. So I'm going to talk about our website, because I'm talking about the resource library. And in the resource library, we literally keep everything out there. So where you go is, it's that website, and it will take you to this page. It may look very familiar to some of you. You do log in to register for the training. You do have to log in to do claims, and you have to log in if you want to fill out the application. But you do not have to log in if you want to go to the resource library. And it's, like I said, we put everything out here, not just the info. We give so much information out there. It's really worth going through. So as you can see here is the resource library. You do not have to have login access. You do not need a username. You do not need a password. You can just go to that website, click on resource library, scroll down. We have an infant section, and everything I'm going to be talking about today is either in the infant section or in the meal pattern section. So those are the 2 places that you can go for the information that we're going to talk to you about today. So we do have the manual, and on page 197 is where we start talking about infant meals. So if you don't have a copy of the manual, or maybe again, you're a teacher, you don't need the full manual, you can have somebody from your center just print out this section for you. I can't remember quite how many pages it is, but it is very helpful to have. And I will be referring to that. We will be having, some pages have a little blue box, and in that blue box is a number, and that's the page number where you can go back and reference. So if you didn't get the slides, or if they're so small you can't really see them that well, the slides that we keep out in the resource library under training slides and handouts, they're 1 per page. So we keep them out there all year long. You can always go out there and refer to these if you need to, if you didn't want to print them out, because I understand you may not want to print them out. We also, like I said, we will have this training in OSDE Connect. We just don't have very many of our 2023 out there yet, since we just started 2023 in October. We have to do a little bit of recording for those. So I'm recording today. So if you guys do need anything, just let us know. Now, when it comes to infants, they sound like they'd be easy, but let me see here. Sorry, I'm having someone that's having issues. Hearing. So hopefully this will help. If you see your mute button, there's a little arrow. If you ever cannot hear, click on that and do test speakers. And that should help to see if you can hear or not. Because I think everybody else can hear. This is the only one I'm getting feedback on that cannot hear. So if you are on CACFP, you are required to offer your infants the meals on the CACFP program. Now, I'm going to be honest, when I was in the field, I would always say, why don't you learn the other program first before you do CACFP? But USDA says no, that if you're going to do CACFP, you have to offer infants the CACFP meal pattern program. And so, and people do, because there is a lot to the program, just regular CACFP, but when you throw infants into it, they seem like they're going to be easy, but they're not quite as easy as they seem. So if a parent decides, hey, I don't want what you're serving my child, they can always fill out the infant meal waiver form. That infant meal waiver form, what it does is you can have the parents bring all their food, you don't claim the meal. They're just saying, we don't want to participate in that program. So if you have an infant meal waiver form on them, you don't claim the meals, and you don't have to feed them. Obviously, there's probably a reason they don't want you to feed them what you're feeding them, so they can bring all of the components. Now, I do know I have a head start on here. So what I'm telling you are CACFP rules, and some entities like Head Starts have their rules go above and beyond ours. So I'm just telling you what it is for CACFP. I know it's required for Head Starts that they have to be on our program. It's part of being in Head Start. So, or if they don't want that, then the Head Start does provide that. So I do understand that Head Start does have some other rules that do supersede ours. But I just want to tell this is the CACFP rules to being on our program. When we talk about infants, we're talking about infant through 1 year of age, and infants are what we call feed on demand. So when you're filling out the application and agreement, you're putting in their breakfast times, beginning and end times, when you're doing lunch, the beginning and end of lunch, and you do say snack, the beginning and ending time. You can't claim meals outside of that time. However, infants do not follow that because they are what we call feed on demand. So if you, during the time the infant is at your center, and let's say they have 3 bottles there and the bottles meet the requirements on our program of the serving size, then you can claim the meal. So it doesn't matter if you have one at 9, one at say 12, and one at 2. It doesn't matter the times. They do not have to fall in the window of what it is that you have in the application for your breakfast, lunch, and snack. So when it comes to infant meal patterns, we have 2 age groups. We have birth through 5 months, and we have 6 months through 11 months. Both of those require the infant to have iron-fortified formula, breast milk, or a combination of both. Milk is not allowed to be served at infants. And so I'm going to preface what I'm going to say with a lot of stuff on here. Even when I talk about anything with child nutrition, if you have a child or an infant that can't have anything that we state that they have to have, if you have a doctor's note and that doctor's note tells you what the substitution is, then you can provide that. So if you were to happen to have a note that says infant can have milk, then you would serve the milk. As an infant, I could not have formula, so I had to drink goat's milk. I mean, it can happen. I was one of them that you may have a note to serve milk. And like in my situation, I couldn't have formula. I was in the hospital a couple of times with dehydration, so they put me on goat's milk. So there could be a situation, but if you're going to serve something different than what I'm stating, you do have to have a doctor's note. And then if they say something specific, like a specific substitute, then that's what you give them. So if they say no, let's say they say no iron-fortified formula, so that means you could do breast milk. But if it doesn't tell you what else to substitute it with, then again, you would have to do breast milk or something. We do need to know what the substitution is. So documenting, if you have a parent that wants to come on site to breastfeed, a parent can do that. It is allowable and you can still claim the meal. What you would need to do is on the records, on the forms, your infant meal servings form is you would just put like mother on site, breastfed on site, just to indicate that we're not going to know an amount because the child was breastfed on site. So with iron-fortified formula, if you're on our program, if you're on CACFP, it is required that your center does have to provide at least one type of iron-fortified formula. Head Starts, I know you provide for everybody, but if you're on the program, even if your parents are bringing formula for their children, you have to have at least one can of something that meets meal pattern requirements. So it'd be iron-fortified formula, whatever one that you choose, you have to have that, a can of it just on hand, just in case you might need it. When it comes to our formula, so this has always been the rule. This slide has been in here since they've changed the meal pattern since 2017, but it says formula must be regulated by FDA, meaning it cannot be purchased outside of the US. Now, I do know that we had we had a shortage of formula. We did have some guidance on that. So if you're still running into that issue, we can talk to you about that. We'll talk to you about guidance, but just in general, in any other time in the program, it has to be FDA approved. It cannot be formula not from this country. But again, we do understand with the formula shortage, there were some that were brought in. If you run into that situation, again, just contact our office and we will walk you through what you can do. If an infant does not drink the entire bottle that you give them, just make sure you store their leftovers properly in accordance with the health and safety requirements. Now, Oklahoma, so if you look into the feeding infants milk, if you look into the feeding infants guide that I was telling you about, that book, it's a spiral, the infant feeding, it has what USDA's is, but Oklahoma's health standards are more severe than that. So you would follow the state of Oklahoma, which is a bottle is good for 1 hour. So after that, you would either have to discard it or you can't serve it. And I know some of you that you give back your formula back to the parent at the end of the day. You don't physically discard it. You give it to the parent to discard. So when we talk about birth through 5 months, breast milk or infant formula is the only component that is required. So you have to serve a minimum serving size of 4 to 6 fluid ounces of express breast milk or infant formula for it to be reimbursable. So again, if you have someone that's from birth to 5 months and you're feeding them 4 to 6 fluid ounces 3 times a day while they're in your care, then you can claim 3 meals. Even if you give them 4 bottles with 4 to 6 ounces, every child and every infant can only be claimed for 3 meals per day. So even if you gave them 4 bottles of 4 to 6 ounces, you can still only claim them for 3 meals. So now let's talk about when you introduce solid foods. So once an infant shows signs of being developmentally ready, solid foods must be offered. Gradually introduce your solid foods, prepare foods in the right texture and consistency, and observe infants closely for any reactions that they might have to these new foods. Now, I'm sure we saw that there's some new people on here, and we saw that there is some people that have been on for a long time. Now, I will tell you that 90% of you, 95% of you are going to be doing what the parent wants you to do. So if the parent says, once I'm feeding, you're doing it. Like I said, I know some of you have been around for a long time and you're the one who's like, okay, I think your child needs to be eating X, Y, and Z. But most of you, you're going to be going by what the parent and or the pediatrician is telling you to do. So there is going to be cases, and my nieces were one of them. If an infant is developmentally ready to accept solid foods before 6 months of age, then you are to serve them the solid food and you do claim it for reimbursement. So again, once a infant is developmentally ready for solid foods, you have to write it down. We've been seeing that issue a lot. They're like, well, they're not 6 months, so I don't have to write it down. No. If they're eating food, you have to write down what they ate. Think about it this way. If I'm a parent and I come to pick up my child and I come home and they have a rash, the first thing I'm going to do is call and ask, what did you feed my child? So you have to write it down, what you gave them and how much. So even if they start eating, my nieces started eating at 4 months of age. So it's going to happen. You may have some that are going to start eating before 6 months. Once they do become 6 months of age, you do have to increase the amount of expressed breast milk or infant formula to 6 to 8 ounces for breakfast and lunch. And at snack, it only requires 2 to 4 fluid ounces. Foods from all components are to be offered when the infant is developmentally ready. We understand that when an infant is learning to eat, that they maybe one day have fruit and then they're not doing well with that fruit. So then you take that fruit away and then you give them some vegetable. They're doing okay with that vegetable. So let's introduce another vegetable. And then a week later, let's try some fruit again. We understand what it's like when infants are learning to eat. So that's what USDA does, is they understand and they do things completely different. I have 2 nieces. They are sisters. They are 2 years apart, almost to the day, same pediatrician. And the pediatrician did things completely different with both of them. So we understand that's why it's 0 to 2 ounces or 0 to 4 tablespoons, because we do understand that, you know, my oldest niece started with infant cereal, then went to fruit. My youngest niece did not ever have infant cereal. And we're kind of seeing that some parents are not wanting their children to have infant cereal at all. They just started them with fruit. And then there's also, if you've heard of, I think I finally got it in my mind, it's baby fed weaning, where they only eat real food. Like you usually start, I think, with avocado, it's real food, and you just put it in the texture what they need. So it is set up. That's what these great about these meal patterns, that it is set up for the pediatrician and the parent to decide what is best for that child. Now we're going to talk about the components for infants. For breakfast, lunch, and snack, these are the components. We have breast milk, iron-fortified infant formula, infant cereal, meat alternate or a combination of both, vegetable or fruit or a combination of both, and then grains. And grains are only allowed at snack. And I'm going to talk to you more about what the grains are. And again, grains are only claimable at snack. So in the Feeding Infants Guide, this is on page 59, it's at the very bottom of the workbook. It says the amounts of solid food listed in the infant meal pattern are provided as range 0 to 2 ounces and 0 to 4 tablespoons. I need to correct my slide. It says this provides flexibility to offer the right amount of solid foods based on their developmental readiness. So again, we understand that when they're first starting to eat, you might give them just a little bit, like maybe 1 tablespoon. And then the more that they're eating, you know, you're testing them out when they're first learning to eat. But once the baby has been introduced to the solid foods, like once they really are eating them, they're not really going back and forth, you would offer them the full 2 tablespoons of solid foods. So once they do start eating, you have to give them the full amount. The 0 to 2 tablespoons, or 0 to 2, I thought, ounces, and 4 tablespoons. So you do have to offer the full amount once they're eating it regularly. So when we come out to do a review, or if you are multi-sided and you have an 8-month-old, this is in a Q&A. It is in the manual on page 214. It's in the Q&A number 6. It says, what should a monitor do when conducting an on-site review? If I come out and you have an 8-month-old that is not being served solid foods, I'm supposed to come to you and ask you just what the situation is. It could be something very valid. It could be, I've seen it. You have a premature child who is not developmentally ready at 8 months of age. I have heard and seen parents that do not want their child to have any solid foods until they're 1 year of age. I see a lot of things like that. So it could be a very valid reason. If they come out and they are eating solid foods, it's just you're not writing it down, because we're getting that a lot. They're like, well, I don't have to write it down because it says 0 to 2 or 0 to 4. And that's not the case. As we mentioned before, once they start eating, you have to write it down. So again, it doesn't mean anything's wrong. It's just they're supposed to ask the question, like, why are they just not eating solid foods? So focusing on their eating habits, we do again understand that some infants may eat certain foods one day, 1 week, but not the next. That's just part of it when they're learning to eat. Meals and snacks consistent with eating habits, we won't disallow. So we won't disallow any meals, again, if it's like, oh, now we're serving them fruit, but then we're having issue with fruit, so we take the fruit away for a while. If there's any inconsistencies, we're not going to take it away, because especially when we know that they're learning to eat. The one biggest solid piece of advice I have for everybody and anybody is, when it does come to infants, like I said, 95% of the time you're doing what the parent and the pediatrician wants them to do. So my suggestion to you is do a written statement, or some of you have parent communication forms, but I would definitely get signing from a parent. I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but your parent will tell you to do something and then you do that. And then they said, I never told you that. So this just kind of protects you. And it also, when we come out to do review, it lets us know, like, for instance, maybe you have an 8-month-old that's not eating because the parent says, I don't want my child to have food until they're 1. Get that in writing. And that way you won't have a finding on the review because you're doing what the parent states. Like I said, my youngest niece, it's becoming a little bit more common that they never gave her infant cereal, and it's going to play into a part in this. So if they're not giving them infant cereal at all, I would definitely can I get a note saying you don't want them to have infant cereal? We will not feed them infant cereal. We do have a written statement form that you can use in the infant section of the resource library. But if you also go, I don't know if I put it up there yet or not, but in the Feeding Infants Guide, there's a written statement. It's really cool. It's front and back, and the parent just fills it out. It's bubbles. It just may change periodically because, they are learning to eat, so things could change. But I would highly suggest you get something in writing if the parent does or does not want you to do something specific with their child. When it does come to CACFP, the parents are allowed to bring one credible component, and a lot of times they are bringing the breast milk or the formula, but it has to be creditable. So let's just say that they give you not iron-fortified formula, which really, I don't even think you can find it on the shelf. I think you have to get a prescription for it. But let's just say you do not get iron-fortified formula. That's not creditable. So you would have to have a doctor's note to still give that to them. It has to be able to be claimable on our program in order for you to serve it. But a parent can bring one thing. And again, most people, the parent brings the breast milk or the formula because it is hard. You may have 10 different infants and they're all on a different formula. So it's just impossible for you to buy 10 different formulas. So you do have to provide the rest. If a parent wants to bring 2 items, then I would do the infant meal waiver form and not claim the meal. So again, okay, it is 2 tablespoons. The minimum serving size is 0 to 2 tablespoons and 0 to 4 ounces. It is required at all meals, including snacks, when they're developmentally ready. So you'll give them fruit or vegetable at breakfast, fruit and vegetable at lunch, and fruit or vegetable at snack once they are developmentally ready. It can be both commercial, it can be combined. So let's just say that you buy the commercial baby food and it is sweet potato and apples. It can be a mixture of that. You can also make your own, but just make sure it's in the appropriate texture for that age group. Now, when it comes to juice is not allowable on CACFP. Again, the only way you could serve this, like everything that I had as an infant, is unallowable. So, but I am older too. As a matter of fact, you could serve juice a few years ago. You could no longer serve juice now. I had juice as an infant, but juice is not allowable unless you have a doctor's note. They have to be 1 year of age before you can give them juice. But I understand why you give them juice. So again, there may be very credible that you will get a doctor's note, especially when they're that 11 and 12 month mark. Now, meat and meat alternate, these are items that can be served. If you buy the jarred meat, it'll say meat with gravy. So it'll say like ham with gravy, beef with gravy. Those are all creditable. You can serve yogurt, but you can't serve soy yogurt, just regular yogurt. Cheese, you can serve egg. And again, the serving size is 0 to 2 tablespoons and 0 to 4 ounces. And with yogurt, there is a sugar requirement. Sugar, you cannot, and I'm going to show you how to do this, but if you have a cook and they're buying, so this is for the entire center, it's not just for infants. So all yogurt served at a daycare can have no more than 23 grams of total sugar per 6 ounces. So how it works is, so we have a WIC list, and on that WIC list, on the cereal side, it just lets you know if they meet the sugar requirements. And then on the other side, it has breads, tortillas, and pastas, and they tell you that they're whole grain. There are yogurts on the WIC list, but you cannot use the WIC list for yogurt because all of those yogurts do not meet requirements. And it doesn't say anywhere, like in guidance, it says that you can use the WIC for the cereal for sugar and then for whole grains, but it never says anything about using it for cereal. So you cannot use it, for yogurt. But what you do is you take the package. So we're right here, our nutrition facts label. It's a serving size of 6 ounces. So you have your container, 6 ounces, and then you scroll down here to sugar, or if it says total sugar, you look at that and it says 19 grams. So this is also in the Feeding Infants Guide. It has a chart like this. So that's what I'm telling you, the Feeding Infant Guide is amazing. So you can go to the chart in the Infant Meeting Guide. It is in the back in the appendix, or you can go to the manual. This is in the manual as well under the meal pattern section. And you would just come down to your yogurt, go to 6 ounces, and then it says 0 to 23 grams. And the yogurt that we just looked at had 19 grams. So you can serve that yogurt. And from what I have seen, and I haven't been in the field, it's been about 4 years since I've been in the field. But when I was out there, from what I saw, pretty much every Yoplait yogurt did meet requirements. So that's just kind of a helpful hint. A good place to start is with Yoplait. Now, cheese. Certain cheeses meet, some cheeses do not. So it's all about, again, looking at the label. So this right here, it says prepared cheese product, and these do not meet requirements. So when I'm showing you something like this, this is coming from, it's called the Crediting Food Handbook. It's that, when I showed you that very first handout at the very top, it had Crediting Food Handout. It had a link. That's where this is coming from. It lets you know what you can and cannot serve. The middle one was a food buying guide, which I don't think you'll use it quite as much. I think you'll use this the most, the Crediting Handbook, which is the first on the, if you get the handouts, it's the first link. And then the bottom one, that bottom link is the Feeding Infants Guide. But again, if you go out to the resource library, you can get the Feeding Infants Guide in the infant section, and in the CACFP Crediting Handbook, it's blue and white. You can get that in the meal pattern section. So it's a really good book. I will tell you, if the cheese melts really well, then it's probably a cheese product, or if it's the sliced cheese and it's individually wrapped. Most of the times those will not work. So infant cereal and grains. So infant cereal, the boxed infant cereal that you mix with water, it can be served at all meals. It is required to be served at breakfast and lunch. So you have to serve breakfast and lunch. I'm going to show you something else though first. It must be either made with whole grain or enriched, and I don't know of any that are not. And you cannot at all serve grain-based desserts, which grain-based desserts are not allowed for anybody in CACFP. Grain-based desserts are items like cookies, and there's some donuts. You can do waffles, but you can't do like donuts and cookies. Even vanilla wafers are not allowed. There's things with a lot of sugar they're really watching on. So infant cereal, this is in the Feeding Infants Handbook. It's on number 174, number 14. So it says, can I serve a baby in my care? So let's just say they're 10 or 11 months. Can I serve them pancakes, fruit, and formula at breakfast or lunch and claim it as a reimbursable meal? And it says no. The only grain that is allowable at breakfast or lunch is iron-fortified infant cereal. Other grains cannot be served in place of infant cereal. The pancake would be an extra, not part of the reimbursable meal. So I'm going to show you something, if this is making any sense to you. So let me show you the infant. Let me pull this up. Okay, so let me go back to... Let's go to breakfast. So because it's going to be common that this might be something for breakfast. So as you can see here for breakfast, it says you have to have 0 to 6 for 6 through 12, 6 to 8 fluid ounces of breast milk or formula, and infant cereal or a meat, and it gives you all the meat options, and fruit or a combination, vegetable or a combination of both. So what this means is you cannot serve breast milk, a pancake is not on here, and a fruit. It will not be a reimbursable meal. But what you can do is you could do formula or breast milk instead of doing infants, because we understand that once they get a certain age, they don't like infant cereal. We know that. So what you can do instead is you could give them yogurt, you could give them cheese, you give them eggs, and then you can give them the pancake, and you can give them a fruit or milk. So you have to give them either infant cereal or a meat alternate to meet requirements. So if you do want to give them something like a pancake, a waffle, anything that you're serving the other kids for breakfast, maybe it's Cheerios. If you want to give them those items, then you need to give them, I would give them either like eggs or cheese or cottage cheese yogurt. Give them something from this list. So that way that you can serve them the pancake and it be reimbursable, if that makes sense. Get back going.
I didn't get that.
Oh,
could you try
sorry,
again?
My watch. Okay. Snacks. So at snack only is the only time that you're allowed to do bread, crackers, and ready to eat cereals. So we're talking about, again, bread, toast, crackers, Cheerios, anything like that is only allowed to be served at snack. Again, ready to eat cereals cannot have any more than 6 grams of sugar per dry ounce. And again, you'll use the same technique that we did for yogurt. You'll do the same for cereal. But again, this applies to everybody at the center, not just the infant. So when it comes to yogurt and when it comes to cereal, talk to the cook or whoever buys the food, because they are going to know what you can serve them that will meet requirements. So I did mention there's a WIC approved list. All you do is Google WIC approved cereal and it shows up this. There's a lot more cereals that you can do at the grocery store, but if you just want something automatic to look at, you can serve these here. So a lot of times we see regular Cheerios, maybe Kix, and then multigrain Cheerios. Honey Nut Cheerios have too much sugar in them. They are not allowable for CACFP. And I talked about the grains chart and grain-based desserts. And this right here is showing what you cannot have. So again, I mentioned earlier, oops, sorry. You can't have like a Nutri-Grain bar. We see vanilla wafers or Fig Newtons. Those are not allowable. And these are for anybody in the center, not just for infants. So this is what we'll find. I'm going to show you. If you want to know what all you can and cannot serve, this is called the grains chart. It's in the handouts. And anything that's in black can be served. Anything that is in red is not allowable. So if it's in red, you cannot serve it. And this goes for anybody in the center, not just for infants. So again, donuts, it does allow you to do muffins and French toast. You can do pancakes and waffles. They did keep croissants. They did keep a lot of the breakfast items on here. But again, the reason they're still on the list is because schools can still serve them. But it does let you know what you cannot serve. So none of the good stuff. And then of course, none of this is in red. Okay. Now, in that handout that I showed you about the combination food, a lot of people will just ask, like, and in the back of the Feeding Infants Guide, it also does give you this information as well. This is some credible food for infants, like beans, cheese, fish, fruit, finfish, it says, and shellfish. And it tells you what component it equals. And then there's a list of non-creditable. So with infants, like we talked about, you can do cereal, breads, and crackers, but you can't do cooked grains. You can't do macaroni and cheese. These are all extra items. So again, if you're serving lunch, make sure you're doing a meat with that, and then you could serve them one of these items. And I don't know why soy yogurt. You can serve soy yogurt to kids over 1, and there is soy formula. So I'm not sure why you can't serve soy yogurt. Combination foods. So again, if you buy something from a manufacturer and it's a combination of, say, like it's chicken and noodle, or it's anything that has like a meat, noodle, and it comes in a baby food jar. There are some that you can serve, there's some that you cannot, and I'm going to kind of show you what those are. So I talked to you about we talked about the non-creditable list. We just looked at that. And again, as I mentioned before, all credible food items are in the food buy or into that infant meal in the back. It's an Appendix F in the infant food list in the Feeding Infants Guide. That was a tongue twister. So as long as the item that you're buying, as long as one item in there is a credible food product, then you can serve it as a part of the reimbursable meal. So these are some examples, but it has to be, so if you buy, for instance, Gerber, and this tells you that in this container, it has 1/8 of a cup of sweet potato, 1.5 teaspoons of turkey, and 2.5 tablespoons of cooked grain. Sweet potato is creditable, and so is turkey. So as long as one item in there is creditable, you can serve it. But it can't just say sweet potato, turkey, and cooked grains. It has to tell you how much is in it. If it just says sweet potato, turkey, and cooked grains, it wouldn't be creditable, but it has to tell you how much is in it. Here's another one. It's chicken and noodle, and it has 1/8 of a cup vegetable, 1.5 teaspoons of chicken, and 2 tablespoons of cooked pasta and rice. And again, this is not creditable, but these 2 items are, so you would be allowed to serve it. But from my understanding, a lot of centers are not serving this. It just costs a lot more. A lot of times by the time they're eating stuff like this, you're really giving them a plate of food. Donated products, it is unallowable for you to serve them donated food. So if someone says, hey, I have 5 containers of formula, you can have it. You can't serve that to the children because it was donated. Especially, and this has always been the rule, if parents want to give you their WIC stuff, like for everybody, not just for their kids, but for the whole center, that is unallowable. It always has been. They cannot, one federal entity cannot be paying for another federal entity. So if a parent wants to give it to, they can give it to their children. They can't do it for the whole center. We've seen it where they're like, hey, I have 10 cans left of formula. I'll just donate to you. And you cannot accept it, especially if it's WIC. You were never allowed to accept it if it was on WIC. Record keeping. So as I mentioned before, if you have a child who cannot have the things on ours, or say they are having juice, or maybe they're doing goat's milk because they were like me and couldn't have formula, then they have to have a medical statement on file. So, and you always do what the medical statement says. So if it says goat's milk only, then you only give them goat's milk. You don't give them formula. If it says give juice, then you give juice. If it just says, I'm trying to think, I'm really going to see something, and probably with infants, they're going to tell you what they want you to substitute it with. If it says something on there specific to substitute, then you would substitute it with that item. When it comes to the record keeping, all the forms must be maintained daily by month at each site for any institution participating in CACFP. If you are making your own baby food, just please indicate that someplace, because we do look at receipts. So we are looking to see what you're buying. If we don't see baby food on your receipts, then we're going to be like, are you not buying any? But you could be making it. Like I said, there is, if you heard the baby weaning, baby led weaning, it's all natural food. There's no baby food. So again, just let us know if you're making it, or if you are, we'll see it if you're purchasing it. This is the infant meals as served form. So again, once a child is eating, you have to put what they're eating here. And really this needs to say infant cereal, because now beforehand, you were never allowed to give them Cheerios. But we would really tell you to put Cheerios if that's what you were giving them. So we're going to assume that this has to be infant cereal. So how this is, so there's 2 ways to do this. This is how the form looks in our manual. We also have this where you can print it out as an Excel worksheet. And there's 2 ways. If you look at the tabs at the bottom, there's 2 ways you can fill this out. And I'm going to explain both of those to you. But remember, whatever they're eating, you have to write it down and tell us how much that you gave them. So Harrison Butler, as you can see here, you could do Harrison Butler, and we do have to know every day what age they are. You don't have to necessarily put it on every line, but we do need to know every day what month they are. So in this case, Harrison Butler was the only child in care, and he was there for breakfast, lunch, and snack. So you can list 5 kids on here for breakfast, list 5 for lunch, and 5 for snack, and again, 5 for supper. But you also, again, you have to mark what you gave them. Now you'll see with formula, there's an asterisk here, and this asterisk indicates that the parent brought the formula. But so that means the center is bringing everything else. Now, the other way that you can write this, which I've seen it, but we also created this way as well, and it is in the resource library, is I've had some people right here put, say, Harrison Butler 9 months of age, and then we put Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Because I do understand too, you might have a baby room and you have two people in there, and they're each taking care of different ones. And so each person would have their own form. So it's however you choose to do it. You can do 1 per day and list all kids, or you may have to have 2 you may have to have 2 of these, or you could give each child their own, and it would be for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. It's however you choose to do it. But either way, we have to know the name and we have to know how old they are at least once per day. You don't have to write it down 3 times. And the infant menu is served forms, as I've stated before, because this has been a problem, is once an infant does start eating solid food, it is required the exact food item is written down and the amount the child is given. Just because there's a 0 on the meal pattern doesn't mean you don't list it. It just means that if the child is not going to eat that, they don't have to eat it. Like I said, my niece never had infant cereal, my youngest one. On our forms, if you have any forms that you're doing different than ours, you can use it, but you do have to get it approved first from your program specialist. Your program specialist is the one that comes out to do your review. Now, some of you have kind of a parent communication form and it says like, baby had bottle at 10:36, drank 4 ounces, took nap. I mean, it's very detailed. If you want to use that, as long as it tells us what you serve them for food and how much, you can use it, but you have to get it approved from your specialist first. We don't feel you need to write everything down 5 different times. So if you do have something that you're doing that would be maybe for both, for us and for the parent, talk to your program specialist, create a form and send it to them and be like, hey, can I use this? You have to get it approved first from your program specialist, because we have run into situations where people created their own form and it didn't have the information we needed, and it did result in an overclaim. So we just say, and like I said, our forms are good for most, they're not good for all. So if you have something that's better, and a lot of you do, just send it to them and let them know that you want to use that form and see what they have to say. So when we do come out to do a review, we do have to look at certain labels. So one is if you have a combination baby food, we have to see the label to see how much, like I showed you the Gerber one. And also if you do yogurt or breakfast cereal, because we have to make sure that it stays within the sugar requirements. Now, one question that we do get is what would happen? What would you have to do for us to take money back? Because we do take back money if a review doesn't go very well. And these are some areas where we would take back money. So if you're serving juice, and again, this is stuff if you don't have a doctor's note, if you're serving juice, if you're serving a grain-based dessert, which would be like a Fig Newton, a Nutri-Grain bar, a cookie, anything like that, any of those red items that you cannot serve. If serving an item that's not permissible on CACFP, if insufficient quantities or quantities you didn't mark them down, if you did not record anything, you just left it all blank, even though you're serving the child. And if you just, if your records don't support the claim, meaning like, let's say that you had 4 kids that ate that day, but you said that 5 did. And that's what we mean by the documents don't support the claim. Well, you guys have been a very quiet group today. We do have information. We have blank pages on page 217 of the manual. So like the infant is served form, it's out there. The infant meal waiver form is in page 217. Those are all blank pages. In the resource library, we have under worksheets, it's at the very bottom is all of our interactive forms. And then we have some forms in our center forms, but really if there's some that also pertain to infants, it's also going to be in the infant section as well. So definitely go there. I talked about your program specialists. They're the ones that come out to do your review. If you go to page 5 of your training manual, it does list all the program specialists in there. It's done by county. So once you know who your program specialist is, their information in there is a work cell phone and an email address. So you can email them or text them if you have any questions, but especially if you have forms that you would like to use on your own. Or if you just have questions like, hey, can you come out to make sure I'm doing my stuff right? They can do that. They can't come out like right away. They do have to plan their schedules out 2 weeks in advance, but they can come out and help you. And then you can always call our office as well if you have any additional questions. Well, you guys were a really good group today. You guys were very quiet. We are done for today. I hope you guys learned some information. I hope it made it a little bit easier about infants, the do's and don'ts. I'm going to stay on for just a little bit if you guys have questions, but you guys are free to go. And as a reminder, we do not send out certificates for our program. They are listed at the bottom of the business maintenance page. And in just a couple of months, right now it just has the date So today's date, and it says infant meals, but in a couple of weeks or a couple of months, they're going to be doing an update, and it's going to show your name down there and the number of hours. So thank you guys again for being here. You guys are free to go, and I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of the week. That's a really good question about, do all meal components have to be offered at the same time? And they don't. If you're meaning like, if you mean like, if they are eating them all, if let's say they're 11 months old and they're eating a plate. So if you are eating a plate, you put plate on there and say that they're getting like spaghetti and all that kind of stuff, they would have it all at the same time. But if they're starting out to eat and they're only eating like fruit, then no, they don't, because they're not having everything. But once they are eating everything, it does have to be served all at the same time. Except for, I would say the formula can be different, because a lot of times they can't, it's hard for them to have a bottle and then to eat. So I would say the formula is the one that wouldn't be at the same time, but the food part would be at the same time, if that makes any sense.